What's up, players and playerettes? In note one, I'll be talking about the word artist. It's a word that I think about often. It's something that's on my mind more than I would like to admit. And it's also a word that I have a little bit of a complicated relationship with. As with any word, I think it's important to establish its definition and its origin when you talk about it. And the word artist, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, means a person who creates art, such as painting, sculpture, music, or writing, using conscious skill and creative imagination, or a person skilled in any of the arts. Within both definitions, I think the key word is skill, and that also is present within the origin of the word art, which comes from Latin, which stands for skill, method, or technique. Obviously, to define either of those things is not as simple and straightforward. Art and artistry and artists, and how we define that, is always going to be a subjective thing. It comes down to personal taste, preference, and personal biases, subconscious and conscious. However, having said all that, knowing that both within the origin and the definition of the word art and artist, skill is present, I think it's okay to establish sort of a ground rule that it is necessary for someone to possess some sort of skill to call themselves an artist or to create art. The complexity of the word artist, though, is growing even bigger nowadays, I think, because the responsibilities and the opportunities that artists get are ones that common people are not privy to. They get to influence masses through defining what's cool, what's not, through setting trends, and through even expanding their reach outside of their respective field. Much like everybody else, of course, I have my own taste, my own preferences, and my own personal biases, again, conscious and subconscious. And those help me define what to me art is and who's an artist and how I consume art. To give you an example, for me, a perfect example is Antoni Gaudi. That's someone who I would call a true artist. For those of you unfamiliar with the name, he was a Spanish Catalan architect in the 19th and early 20th century. He was called God's architect, believe it or not. And he's someone who you can still see his influence in Barcelona today. He left his fingerprints all over that city through his artistry and through his work. His greatest creation, obviously, the Sagrada Familia, still unfinished to this day, but he's left the mosaic patterns all over the city. He's left a lot of buildings that people are still in awe of to this very day. And another thing that he had was his sort of mysticism. I think the way that he neglected the spoils that are usually associated with an artist's lifestyle, the fancy clothes, the parties, the hanging around influent people. He rejected all of that, and he started leading a sort of secluded and isolated lifestyle, if you will. Which, again, like I mentioned, mysticism, that's something that contributed to his death, unfortunately. His appearance had become so neglected. His choice of clothes had become so, as some people would say, synonymous with what hobos would look like. The story goes that he was taking a walk one day and he got hit by a tram. But the way that he looked and he had taken care of himself, people weren't able to recognize. So therefore, for a few days, he wasn't even able to get the help necessary for him to make it through. And unfortunately, he passed away. I'll bring up Gaudi for two reasons, though. One being, I'm not fooling myself into thinking that every artist should be held to the standards that he set, right? It's impossible to hope or expect of someone to have the devotion and the determination to dedicate your entire life to your artistry. But two, I bring him up because he held values that I think every artist should strive for, even to this day. He truly, truly cared about his art and his craft. He was respectful of what came before him, but still found a way to impose his own style and impose his own creative imprint. And three, and I think most importantly, he wanted to leave a mark in a way that made things better for those who came after him. I think there's plenty of great examples throughout history and nowadays for artists who hold those same values within their respective fields. But I think personally, from my experience in the last 10 years, the word art and the way art has been consumed has really devalued the word and the meaning of it. I've been fortunate enough myself to create and design for like 10 years or so now in my career. But I always go back to when I first moved to New York City and I worked at a recording studio in Midtown Manhattan, and how that sort of became the root of my complicated relationship with the word artist. To give you some context, I would strike conversation with a lot of people. As you know, a lot of people come through a music studio and it's easy to meet new people. And the conversation would always go into, what do you do for a living, right? It's a common question. And oftentimes the answers that I received was, I'm an artist. It never really sat right with me, though. It never did. It still doesn't. Because the way that I perceive art and how to define what an artist is, I don't think it's a label that anyone can just choose to bestow upon them. It's more so something that other people get to put onto you based on your work, who you are, and how they consume your work and your art. So it just felt very manufactured and very fake to me when people said that. What further drove me into this back and forth relationship with the word artist was the fact that I came across the word con artist around that same time. Obviously, I had used that word before and I was familiar with it. I think it's a common word that a lot of people use for various reasons. But by definition, a con artist, again, according to the Merriam-Webster dictionary, is a person who tricks other people in order to get their money. Obviously, to con someone, by definition, requires a skill set, much as the word artist itself, right? But that truly showed me and made me convinced within my own beliefs that the line between an artist and a con artist is super thin. And whenever someone would introduce themselves as an artist to me, I couldn't help but feel, you might actually be a con artist, or I might not actually believe that you're a true artist because you're confident enough to call yourself that. But are you truly creating art, or is your intention truly to create art for the right reasons? I say that because, in my opinion, art and artists those two words have become synonymous with branding and marketing and monetization. It's become a regular thing where I personally think art and being an artist should be something that's out of the ordinary. It shouldn't be that every fifth person you speak to introduces themselves as artist. It feels like to me, like I just briefly mentioned, if you're confident enough to present yourself and to call yourself an artist, then you start sort of imposing that onto other people, which I just find flabbergasting, to be honest with you. In summation, though, I will say I'm not saying all of this because I think I'm the person who's going to define what art and what true artists are and what they should do and how they should approach their art. I'm content with not being that person. I know that those are topics and words that have been undefined for centuries. However, the thing that doesn't sit right with me and never will is the fact that true artists, to their core, have to compete and often be overshadowed by people who want to be artists, who call themselves artists out of confidence, because that's what monetizes. That's what can sort of further them within their careers. I think it's unfair. I think it's a conversation that needs to always be at the forefront. I think it's a conversation that needs to be had. In my opinion, we need to protect true artists, people who are artists at their core. And we need to establish what art is, again, because it's important to protect true artists and true artistry. I think for the most part that covers my thoughts on this note. And until I see you again, you should take notes too.